pants.
I tell you what, leave the pants off, love.
Hello everybody, it's Andrew Roberts here with Linda Wright, and it's Planning Pants breaking news. We've had Boris with build, build, build. And unfortunately, it was just a press release. But Linda, we do have some breaking planning news, don't we? Would you like to share today?
We do, Andrew. I'm so excited. Well, I'm not really that excited because Boris, bless him, build, build, build. And to be honest, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't quite know where he's getting the money from. But, you know, it's very exciting. And bless him, he's trying to bring us out of COVID-19 and all of that kind of stuff. So yes, indeed, build, build, build. I'm very cautious about Prime Minister's speeches. I'm very cautious about what then ends up in the media and people get very excited about, because it's all misinterpreted and it's twisted and it's hyped. And so from that point of view, until I see something written down in black and white in legislation, then it's only then that I get excited and put things out on social media. But
what can we get excited about then?
You can get excited if you have a purpose-built standalone block of flats. You can now put 2 stories on it.
Wow!
Absolutely. Now, let me tell you, this has been talked about for about the last 5 years, and successive governments and prime ministers have talked about it, and it's now actually written down in legislation, which of course I love. And as of the 1st of August 2020, if you have a standalone block of flats and they were built, now then I'm going to have to look at the dates now, it's before the 1st of July, and in between the 1st of July and August, trying to look at this, and 5th of March 2018, so you've got to be careful, they can't be brand new blocks of flats, but if you have a block of flats that does that, and it's around about 3 stories, you can put an additional 2 stories on under. It's not permitted development. It sounds like permitted development. It's a prior approval notification, just like converting offices to residential. It's a prior approval application. Now, as you would imagine, it's a bit more complicated than just converting an office, a block of offices, because you're going up. There's all sorts of limits and restrictions. You can't go above a certain height, 30 meters in overall height. Each of the floors, the 2 of them, can't be more than 7 meters. So there's all, and those are just a few of the things, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details. And
so
also,
we're going to have to notify the neighbours as well, then, aren't we?
All of the neighbours. Not only that, air traffic control and defence, because you're going up. Not desperately high. I wouldn't have expected a Boeing to be crashing into something like that. But you know, it's all got to be looked at, and it's all of the relevant people have got to be consulted upon. So as you would imagine, most of the types of consultations that have to be done on office to residential, they're going to be there as well. Flood risk, land contamination, but there are bolt-ons. This is with bells on. There's lots.
Sorry, you're making me laugh. Flood risk, adding 2 extra floors on top. What's happening to the ones below? Are they swimming?
Well, they're drowning, basically. So this is why. I know it sounds crazy, doesn't it? But all of these things are in here. You can't, you know, it's the bods in Whitehall that have put all of this together. So that's the one thing that has been added into an amendment to the General Permitted Development Order. It's a new Part 20 has been inserted. So there's a whole new part to put in, and it's new dwelling houses on detached blocks of flats. That makes me think like you're going to put a detached house on a block of flats, but no, it's a whole load of new flats on top of a block of flats. So, so that has come in. It's in black and white. It is there. It commences on the 1st of August. So anybody who has blocks of flats and is looking at this type of thing, start looking at this and preparing this now. We're almost out of July. We're halfway through July. Start looking at this now and getting ready to submit your application, a prior approval application, and it has to be submitted before any work is started. Now, the other thing that came through, one of the other things that came through.
More good news.
Well, not exactly good news. Let's get carried away. The issue with this is lots of people have been complaining that the office to residential conversions have resulted in, actually there was an RICS, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors report that said all of these office to residential conversions are creating substandard dwellings. Basically, they're creating hovels. Now, I've seen some and they're absolutely fabulous. There are others that are not quite as fabulous. So there's an issue about creating substandard dwellings. So one of the requirements that has been added to office to residential conversions now is that a floor layout, a floor plan has to be submitted. When I submit these applications, I always submit a floor plan. I always submit a floor layout. I haven't had one of my office to residential conversions refused. I've done conservation areas, city centres, all over the place, and they've all been approved. But what they're now requiring is that there has to be evidence on the floor plans of windows for every single flat in every room. Every room has to have an adequate level of natural light. A habitable room has to have adequate levels of natural light. Now, quite frankly, if people have been submitting plans with bedrooms without windows, I'm sorry, that's disgusting. You should not be doing that. That is cave dwelling. So as far as I'm concerned, this is just a common sense bolt on that says all habitable rooms have to have natural light. So that's a requirement if you're submitting, as of now, that came in as soon as the legislation was published back in June, 25th of June. So if you were submitting a planning application, an application for prior approval, you would have had to do floor plans, and you would have had to make sure that there is an adequate amount of natural light in all of the habitable rooms. So that's
a quick question on that point then.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the previous process, I'm aware developers would submit applications for prior approval to convert a building, and then they'd go back, once securing the change of use from, say, a B1 or an A1 to a C3, and apply for a full planning permission to punch in the windows into the building. Will they need a full planning application now, or will that, by virtue of the fact that it's prior approval, they'll be approved once the plan is approved?
They're only going to be approved now if the windows are in place on the prior approval application. Yeah, you're quite right. Lots of people have done prior approval applications, for example, office. I keep hopping on, but it's just the easiest one, and it's the one that people know most about. Office to residential conversions, they would get prior approval. So the principle of the residential use was established in the using the prior approval system, but the prior approval system does not include any changes to the external elevation. So if you were going to, for example, put a whole load new windows in, change the style and design of the windows, put new doors in, and clad the whole building, hopefully with a fire resistant material, if you're going to clad the whole building and make it look very different and modernize it, then that would require an additional planning application, a full planning application, because it's a material change to the appearance and elevation of the property. So that requires planning permission.
So effectively it only covers, you effectively have to have existing windows, or you have to go to a fallback of a full planning application.
Not with this new prior approval. What they're saying is you have to make sure that each of the windows, each of the drawings shows habitable. Now, that does beg the question, are people going to have to, but the implication is that if you're having to provide each habitable room with adequate natural light, then surely that should be included as part of the prior approval. I will have to do some research on that, Andrew. It's a very good point. I would take it that the prior approval will cover, because you're requiring habitable natural light to each habitable room, I would take it that the prior approval will now cover that.
Well, we'll have to update the viewers.
Absolutely.
On that, because this is breaking news and I'm asking the awkward questions of the expert.
To be perfectly honest, it may be something that Whitehall have just not thought about. And that's happened before. But I will do some research. But yes, I think the issue is whether it's a material change. So if it's not a material change and all you're doing is punching a couple of windows in, but then that begs the question, if you're punching a couple of windows in or more than that for adequate natural light, is that then going to cause a loss of privacy and overlooking for neighbouring properties? So where does the balance stop? Or where does it start even? That if you're going to be doing that, you're having an impact on neighbouring properties. So it's a very good question. It will be addressed next time.
Great point for us to debate. So some really great positive news of things that have been implemented. Boris's build, which is where he was looking at total flexibility to repurpose commercial premises, is just hot air at the moment. It's not legislation, as is the wider range of permitted changes. So all commercial properties, basically the gloves are off, according to Boris, to change them to residential. Well, we'll see what the two houses say about that.
Yeah, I'll wait until it gets through both the Commons and the Lords and it gets passed into regulation. But I think what Boris is trying to do is number one, get the country moving again, but also trying to preempt the fact that lots of people now are, number one, have got used to working from home. So a lot of offices are probably going to become defunct. But not only that, a lot of people are now addicted to Amazon. You know, other retailers are available. But lots of people have realised on lockdown that they can buy online and they don't need to. And a lot of people now are scared to go out onto the high street. And so a lot. I mean, you can see it yourselves. Restaurants and bars as well as retail shops are just toppling over. So that is going to sound the death knell for city and town centres. And so I think what Boris and the team behind him are trying to do is to preempt that and get some life back into. But I think town and city centres are going to change from beyond recognition from what we are used to. And I think some of the ground floors are not going to be in retail use anymore.
I think I'd agree with you. And I think that's where they were coming from when they said no planning applications will be required to demolish and rebuild commercial or residential vacant buildings. You can just see Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, BHS's across the country going with a bulldozer.
They've been talking about that for years as well. That has not come into legislation yet. They've been talking about this for ages and ages and ages. And lots of people, lots of good bodies, such as the Architects, Royal Institute of British Architects, have their hands up in horror because the design implications for that are very, very worrying. So yes, the issue of completely demolishing a block of offices and rebuilding it for residential purposes under a prior approval scheme will have a lot of conditions. It will be not as there will be a lot of hoops to jump through. It won't be as easy as everyone thinks. But yes, it's still on the cards. It's still there and it still potentially could come out. And there's also going to be a new policy paper. We started with this, bless them, central government issued on the 12th of March, they issued planning for the future, in which they were going to, as Dominic Cummings says, take an axe to the planning system, you know, bless him. So that came out just as we were going into lockdown. So they've been threatening to do this, but they've had their hands tied a bit with what's been going on. Then Boris has come up with not only this planning for the future, but also a new policy paper coming out this month. And then, as we've talked about, Andrew, there's supposed to be a new national planning policy framework, which again is an overview of what each local council should be doing and what they should be looking for. The planning for the future was intended to deliver over 1 million homes. So whether they're looking at new build, but clearly they're obviously now looking at repurposing buildings, change of use, and adding on to existing buildings in order to provide that 1 million homes that they're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting times ahead, and I can only say stay tuned here, where we will bring you the planning pants breaking news as it happens. And I'm just looking forward to building upwards 2 floors and having somewhere to dock my little boat, because we've had to do the environment survey for flood risk 2 floors up.
That's it. Dinghy on the roof.
That's it. I'm covered when the tsunami comes. On that note, we'll leave you to it, and we look forward to seeing you again at the Planning Pants Property News. See you soon.
Thanks, Andrew.